let's move on to talking about what we're here to talk about, and that's Illuminations of VillianCon Minion Blast. So like we said, we stopped at Universal on the way to Disney. I guess it was Thursday.
It was Thursday.
Yep. And we were just hoping that it was going to be open during this technical rehearsal time, and it was. So we got to ride it. So this new attraction is in Minion Land. It is being replaced. Let's see, it replaced Shrek 4D, which had been there for a while, like 11, 12 years.
It had been there as long as I remember
longer?
going to Universal.
Okay.
So.
Okay. It wasn't my favorite show. Like I'd seen it like maybe once or twice in the whole time, and I was like, it was okay. Like Shrek's not my favorite, but sorry, Shrek fans.
Shrek 1, I'm trying to think. The Shrek movies are good though. Like as time has gone on, I feel like time has been very good to them though. I mean, Shrek 1 is one of those I remember being very good. I remember Shrek 2 from my memory being very good, and Shrek 3 definitely not as good. If I remember correctly on those, but they're probably worth a rewatch.
Yeah, I may actually watch them just to get a refresh. But anyway, so Minion Land kind of it did a soft opening back in June, middle of June, I think. And this ride, VillianCon Minion Blast, did not open with it. Everything else kind of soft opened, but this one was not ready. But technical rehearsals did start happening on July 15th. Now the grand opening is set to happen, says coming summer. So we're in summer now. So maybe in August? You know, we have no idea. We have no idea.
We do know that Universal has announced though that there's going to be AP preview signups that will happen. They said they'll happen soon. They haven't given an exact date on that. So because we had the question, would they have AP previews? Because they did for Velocicoaster. So it seems they're holding that pattern where they did for Velocicoaster. So they're doing this now for Minion Blast. So I mean, my guess would be they would happen in August, and then the ride either opens late August, early September. They may look for something to kick off into the fall a little bit.
Yeah. And technical rehearsals, just FYI, is just another like word for soft opening. It just means that the ride is not, it's not fully operational. Some elements may be unavailable, and it may not open at all some days. So you just kind of have to wait and see. They also don't post the wait times on the app. You just have to go by and see. Right. So that's also something, because we were really hoping that someone on social media was going to post if it was open or closed, and we didn't see anything that it was closed. We're like, okay, I think we're good, and it was. Yeah. It was open.
For instance, right now, at least when we've ridden it up to this point, in this ride, it's going to tie into the app. They don't have that available at this point.
Right.
Technical rehearsal. So So once it's fully open, having ridden, I don't know how much would change, but there's some small elements that would maybe look a little bit different.
Well, let's talk about what Universal says about the attraction.
Yes. So they say, if you've seen the Minions movies, and if you have not, you should, because they're hilarious. But it says, it's so much fun, it's a crime. So you join Illuminations, Minions, Bell-Bottom, Jean-Claude, and the rest of the Vicious Six at VillianCon as you blast your way to super villain stardom. You use your Eliminator X blaster and test your skills in this fun, interactive attraction.
The Vicious Six were first seen in Minions: The Rise of Gru, which you should also see that, by the way. That's a cute movie. That was set in the 70s?
Yes. I mean, basically, if you want a backstory for this ride, it would be the Minions movies in general, because VillianCon is a big part of the first Minions movie.
I don't think you have to watch Despicable Me.
No, you wouldn't have to. That's why I've seen the Minions movies.
Right.
The Minion one, that VillianCon was a whole thing that it ties into, because it even in the movies took place in Orlando. So it fits very nicely. It's almost like they had this planned out. And then they put this into Orlando. So, yeah.
There is no height requirement, but all guests must be able to stand on their own. This means that any child that is must be held cannot ride.
I believe that's a falling hazard issue.
Oh, sure. Like if you have the person, you don't want to hold somebody be on during the attraction and fall. Yeah. And under 48 inches tall must be supervised. The ride is wheelchair accessible, but it is not ECV accessible. So if you have an ECV, you'll have to transfer to a wheelchair. The walkway is not able to accommodate an ECV.
Right.
Simply said.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the reason for that is, so generally speaking, this attraction is a moving walkway attraction. So essentially, when you're going into Universal Studios, like the walkways that make you walk quicker. What are those actually called? I'm drawing a blank. Moving walkways. My brain.
That you literally just
essentially, it's a treadmill. But anyways, this ride is that. So you stand on that, and it moves you around from room to room, and it doesn't go in a straight line. It goes in like curves.
Yeah,
like that.
And it's not as fast as the ones in City Walk.
No, it's very slow. It's a very slow moving thing. So you have a wireless blaster gun, and you shoot objects and rack up points. And overall, I'd say the ride lasts about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about that. I mean, we'll go into the queue, the attraction, everything. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's start with the queue. The queue is mostly outside.
It is, but it's in the shade a lot.
Part of it was. But so we were in a part of the queue. There is an extended queue kind of in the back, and that had no shade.
But they weren't utilizing it.
Sure.
I think if they utilized that, surely they would put, because they had like tent type stuff above, and they did a really good job where they had fans out there and you were at least in the shade. And mind you, the day we were there, it was very hot, but you weren't in the direct sun. So I'm hoping, surely if they use that extended queue, that they would have that shaded. And
they had the fans blasting.
They did have
they
the fans,
usually do. And they play 2 videos kind of describing the whole concept of VillianCon. And VillianCon, just FYI, was first introduced in the first Minions movie as an evil villain convention in the 60s.
Before any theme parks were there. That's the whole like funny part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was like 1968, I think is what it was. So it was like, it was before Disney World would have been built.
Yeah, the whole thing's in Orlando. So when you're in this thing, it's almost like if you've ever been to a convention on the TVs, they have like seminars, like find your inner villain, find this, like, so it basically set up like you're going into a convention with different workshops, and then the guy talks and like, what was is it Villain? It's like a news network that was talking about Villain News Network. Yeah,
is that what it's called?
Yeah.
VNC is what it's called.
Or Villain News Channel.
Something like that. Yeah. So you see them a lot, and there's a lot of jokes in there, which we won't go into what they are, but I found one that was very funny.
You talking about the parking one?
The parking one.
They did make, I thought this was a good one. They were talking about, obviously being a villain.
Being evil.
Yeah, and they said almost as evil as how much Universal charges for parking. Which I think is funny, that they take a little dig at themselves, because I tell you right now, Disney would never do that.
Probably not. But they also play some just like almost like instructional things about the ride a little bit, not as much outside in the outdoor queue, but you also see glimpses of like social media posts, like tweets, like fake tweets
from villains in the movies.
VillianCon.
Yeah. Well, and some of them are villains from the Despicable Me movies. So I mean,
it's just like Easter eggs.
It's not that you wouldn't enjoy it. Like if you've never seen any of these movies, you still can enjoy this ride.
Yeah.
But if you've seen all these movies, there are lots of Easter eggs throughout here that will be like, oh yeah, I'd see different things. So,
and like another video plays as you get closer to getting inside that explains how to use your blaster gun, which we'll explain in a minute.
Well, and I did think it was cool. They have an infomercial for the blaster gun. Like basically, I think the whole concept of this, you try it out because you can buy it.
Yes, it's you can actually buy it in the store too.
You can. So it's like going to a convention where you see a video and they want you to buy it. So it's kind of like you're in, and they even had posters up if you looked on the walls about like evil placement services, evil pets. So it was really well done. There's a lot of stuff there. Yeah,
it was very well themed. So when you first walk inside the actual building, it's like you're entering what looks like an expo. And at a convention where you have like people have like booths set up, they're trying to like sell you things or show you something that they invented or whatnot. Some things that we saw, and I won't say everything because there was a couple, but there were items from Malicious Motors, which is all these evil cars or whatever. Unlawful Outfitters, which makes the blaster, the Eliminator X Blaster, and Corrupt Companion, and another one was, I can't. You're gonna have to help.
Diabolique. I think it's supposed to be a Diabolique or something. Oh, either way, it's like a villain fashion booth.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah. And they're just like weird.
I said Diabolique because I imagined a Derelique from Zoolander.
I know.
Derelict.
Well, that's what it was.
I think that maybe I'm hoping, because that'd be hilarious.
And they do have in the middle of the, like, because you kind of have to go around like the middle part of it. They have a soundstage V event map, and it shows you what everything is like in this convention, quote unquote. And there's some Easter eggs in there as well. So I thought that was kind of fun, but it was very, very well themed. Very well themed.
Yeah, I mean the outside part is got the TVs are there, and it's like infotainment, have something for you to watch while you're standing in line. One thing I will say though, at least for us when we were in line, the wait said 45 minutes. That line moved pretty consistently the whole time. We didn't wait a ton, so you were moving fairly quickly, and I don't believe we actually ended up waiting 45 minutes.
We waited 25.
Yeah, so
yep.
And given that the type of ride this is, which is continuous moving, it seems to have a pretty good flow to it, which is nice, especially given, you're outside, especially in the heat, but it didn't be bad.
Absolutely. And then you enter the next room, which is where you pick up your blaster.
Yes. Yeah, so you walk in and they tell you to choose one that is illuminating either a blue or yellow light, and they've got like a bulb on the back of them you can see. And they have a cat, and they have a person working there to let you know, like, make sure you get the right one. So one with a red light means it's charging. You don't want to use that. And
they'll tell you not to use it. So
yeah. And one thing about these blasters, they are wireless. They're a little heavy. I was actually a little
pretty heavy.
Surprised at the heft of them. And so for our kids, our daughter, her arm got a little tired using it. Our son didn't really try too much.
He just kind of held it.
But what is interesting is Kendra, owner of Zip Travel, she was there
today.
Yeah, I actually did. Yeah. And she said they told her, because she has a very small daughter.
Yes.
That you can ask for a kid's blaster that's smaller. And they have that.
Which I had not heard this until she said something. So this may be something new, like brand new since they did the soft opening. They're like just kind of listening to guest feedback and like, okay, we finally get
Which
this.
Makes sense because that gun is pretty big.
So it's 3 pounds. 3 pounds, and you have to hold it with 2 hands. So as an adult, it was heavy for me, and I had to keep like switching back and forth between like how I held it. And I was like, I can't imagine our poor kids can't hold this, but it is wireless, so it's not attached to anything, which is kind of, so you have free movement of it, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from here they direct you to stand on a particular dot on the walkway as you get on it. And you have to stay on it. What happens if you move off of it, Jared?
I think it just doesn't register your points.
Your gun, you can't use your gun.
Right.
Yeah, like you can shoot, but it doesn't. Nothing
right.
happens.
This is, I will say one thing about this ride, and we'll talk about more thoughts in it. It's a little bit of a flaw for just all ages. Because, I mean, our son stayed on it, but I could see kids having a hard time just staying in one spot. And I don't know how strict it was. I didn't move off mine, so mine didn't quit working. I don't know how strict that is. But yeah, that you stand where you're not supposed to move. And one thing I will say, the walkway, like it kind of goes in curves. When it's turning, there's a few times you're shooting, you're paying attention to the game. I almost felt like my feet like got caught on something, but it's something that walkway turns, it feels kind of strange. Like you almost kind of like potentially
I didn't even notice.
Not lose your footing, but I kind of looked down a couple times like, oh, it's just moving. So that's something to keep in mind. And maybe I was just standing toward the edge of it a little bit, but that's just something I kind of noticed.
Interesting. I didn't notice that, but that's okay. So on the blaster, when you talk about the blaster for a second, you will see an identifier that'll show up as a marker when you're shooting. So on the top of your gun, it'll have like a color or like the symbol of what you can look at whenever you're pointing your gun. So for me, mine it looked like the villain mask, like the little emblem.
It's the VillianCon logo.
That's right. And mine was blue.
And some are red, some are yellow. Mine was blue as well, I believe.
Blue? Okay.
But it's like if you ever played Call of Duty, where you got like a scope up where you're aiming.
But it's like particular to your actual
supposedly. But again, we'll talk about at the end how that kind of translates to the ride. But yeah. Supposedly you can at least match your color up to your crosshairs.
Right. And there are 2 triggers. There's one where you usually have like a trigger on a gun that has unlimited ammo, and there's one on the front which is power-ups, which I didn't use these because, again, I wasn't sure how to use this. We just kind of went in not knowing much. So apparently they're power-ups, and you have 5 of these power-ups to start with, but you can get more as the game goes on.
It's basically, if you ever played shooting games, it's like a grenade launcher on a gun.
Yeah.
You earn points, but so when you're shooting in here, you're not really shooting at the minions. You don't get any points.
Yeah, nothing happens with minions.
You're kind of, the whole point of this whole thing is to cause chaos. So you shoot like chandeliers in a room or something holding things up. Different boxes, different power-ups. So things are worth different amounts of points. And some of those things you get, I think, are power-ups. Now, they're not really, one thing I will say, they're not super clear about what box does what. So you kind of don't know necessarily what you're shooting for.
You just have to figure it out, yeah.
Which, again, we'll talk about at the end as well. Like, I like it because it does have a lot of repeatability because it's like a game.
Sure.
But yeah, so I use the power-up thing quite a bit. So if you're shooting at something, use the power thing, it's going to make more damage than whatever you're shooting at.
And I think the bananas are the power-ups, like how you get the power-ups.
That would make sense.
I think the bananas
are the fuel of the minions. So
yeah, that's true.
That would make sense.
They really are. So after writing this, I also realized that your blaster will show what kind of ammo you're going to shoot with, where you need to shoot to gain points. So like there are a couple. There are freeze rays, there's force blasts, lightning bolts, and fireballs. Mm-hmm. So if you point at those things, like if in your gun it shows up like a force blast, if you see it on the screen and you shoot at it, you'll get more points.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
I didn't know that. Again, this is a lot of things that we're learning, and we only rode this once, so we need to do this again. But this is just kind of what we've learned since then and while we did it.
Okay,
so
makes sense. All right.
Your points are displayed on your blaster. Do you remember how many points you had?
280,000.
Okay.
I believe.
Mine was definitely under 100 because I was just trying to look at everything and like observe more than I was trying to shoot. But it was chaos.
They didn't have the leaderboard up. So
no.
Typically when this ride is fully operational, you're going to have the app where you can keep track of how you do. And then when you go into the gift shop, it'll even have up, top scores probably of the day or all time or something like that. So you'll be able to see maybe where you rank up, which I as somebody who is too competitive, I'm told sometimes, I enjoy this aspect of it because you can, get a little competition going.
And I think you move through how many rooms? 6?
It's 5 or 6 rooms. I was getting ready to say you move through about 5 or 6 rooms. In each room, you have a screen on left and right side. So you can kind of move around.
You can go back and forth, right? Yeah.
The way that I it's an interesting concept of a ride. It's kind of like Toy Story Mania and mixed with Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin, which I don't really like that ride too much of like the game mode, but where you go between stuff and you can have more free reign to shoot versus Toy Story Mania. So it's like a combo between those two because you can point to wherever you want to go, but it's the gamified aspect of it to where certain things have more points. So I would say it's a much more like Toy Story Mania, but a little bit of like the Buzz Lightyear type of thing. If you've ever ridden that.
Right. And it's not, I mean, it's similar in that it's a shooting game to like Men in Black.
Yeah.
But Men in Black, you're in a ride vehicle.
And in
Minion Blast, you are the ride vehicle.
Right. In Men in Black, you don't really you're shooting at monsters. You don't have like targets to shoot at.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's physical, with Minion or with Men in Black. It's a screen with minions. So.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So, but yeah, as you mentioned, there will be the My Universal app that you can use to basically put your points on. You can like see where you ranked. You can store those points so you can see like how you're improving each time you do it. So it's definitely an attraction that has repeatability. So especially for kids, especially for, I'm going to say for kids like 7 or 8 and up, like in the preteen, teen range, I can see this being very popular with them.
Well, for instance, the first thing I wanted to do is ride it again because I wanted to, like, once you kind of get the feel for how it shoots.
Right.
And that's the thing we'll talk about when we kind of want our thoughts, but like you go like, oh, you kind of get it. And it took me about halfway through the ride to kind of really get the rhythm to it. It's like a new video game. Sometimes a video game takes you a little bit to figure it out. Now, our daughter done the same thing. She was getting competitive with it as well. So, yeah, for her. Our son, he didn't really care much to shoot. I mean, he kind of did it a couple times, but it's not 3D. which is nice. So the kids, like, you don't have to wear glasses because he was just watching it as like he's just watching a show. Like, he loves Minions.
Right.
So he was entertained,
yeah.
but he wasn't really shooting. So I think maybe if he had a lighter gun, I think he probably would have, because that gun was a little bit too heavy for him.
Yeah, I think he was just liking all the funny stuff the Minions were doing, honestly.
Yeah. And they're doing lots of funny things. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's as much as we know right now, and based on our experience and kind of what we learned after. So initial thoughts about the ride, Jared?
I've seen a lot of